Hello everyone, Erowan here to give you some of my first impressions of Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. Right off the bat, I really like this game. I was really hesitant when I first heard about it. I kind of rolled my eyes thinking that it was going to be like all the other Lord of the Rings game, which were pretty terrible. I've played a number of them and none of them really gave you the experience that I think people were looking for out of, what could be a Lord of the Rings game, but I really like this game, and so I wanted to give you some of my first impressions on what I'm thinking playing through it. I've played about 8 hours. Planning on spending a lot more time with it. But yeah, from the get-go, I was pretty skeptical, but there have been some very positive reviews, and I think I fall in line with pretty much most of those. First thing that I noticed about the game that I really like is that the difficulty is really refreshing. In general, I think it's tuned appropriately. I think some people have said that it's pretty easy, but I haven't played a ton of the Batman games, the Batman Arkham games, and the combat system is very similar to those. So there has been a little bit of a learning curve for me. But I think the difficulty is just about right, but there are no settings. So if you do find it too easy or even too hard, right now there's no way to change that. If you go after an Uruk chief that is particularly leveled up, you will absolutely need to exploit his weaknesses using the intelligence system. And that's tied into the Nemesis system, which really is kind of the key feature that this game is different from other games like it. The Batman Arkham games, like I said, as well as Tomb Raider to an extent, and Assassin's Creed. A lot of compared it to Assassin's Creed. I don't find as many similarities with that, honestly. Although some of the kind of the parkour elements do look like that, but it doesn't play very much like Assassin's Creed in my opinion. But the Nemesis system is very engaging and personal. It is a great way to inject kind of emotion into taking down some of the enemy bosses in the games. In the game, if you have a hard time with a specific boss and it keeps killing you and just drives you nuts, it just adds a lot of layers to the game and kind of makes your own personal story without having to have like a branching storyline. Rather than doing that, like say Mass Effect or something like that, it just has the actual gameplay respond to you, and I think that's a really great way to do that. Let's see, after you kill an Uruk, basically, you level up. If they kill you, then they level up and they get promoted, and others beneath them kind of get promoted as well. And if you get killed by an Uruk who's maybe like a no-name, they get promoted to a chief. And there's kind of a ranking system there, and if they kill you a number of times, they can get extremely powerful. And then they challenge each other. I'm going to be going into that in depth, so I'm going to save kind of the deeper explanation of that for another video, but it is very fun and kind of the core of this game. Like I was saying, it can be very difficult to kill chiefs rather. There's war chiefs and chiefs. That's kind of two levels of the Uruks here. And you can gather intelligence to find out their weaknesses and then kind of exploit those on what the best way might be to take them out, whether it's like stealth or using an animal. Some of them are afraid of fire, things like that. Things, in the environment or your own moves that can kind of exploit their own weaknesses. So all of that makes for a really, really fun gameplay. The action is really fluid. Combos are satisfying. It can be a little clunky at times, but it is very fun, and the way that the leveling system works also adds a nice amount of depth to the game. You can kind of personalize how you want to approach combat, although it is kind of locked, so you can't really say, okay, I really just want to do bows and just level up the bows, like, just that, and not you focus on the other things. They kind of make you level everything at the same time, which I think is a bit of a mistake, because like if you're going to have you unlock things, the way it progresses, you can't really put points into a different tree until you've unlocked the other ones anyway. So kind of a missed opportunity there, but in general, the action is good, and the RPG elements that kind of go along with the action do kind of help keep the gameplay changing and exciting, and like you're unlocking new features. The environment is very detailed, definitely fits within the Tolkien Jackson universe, but isn't like a cheap copy. They have their own feeling. It's a different time period. So it shares enough to be recognizable, but it doesn't just kind of rip all the good ideas off of that and not do anything on its own. And the Uruks have a ton of really great lines. There's very solid voice acting, which studios often skimp on things like that, in games like this. That is definitely not the case in Shadow of Mordor. Both the main character, the elven wraith, as well as all of the Uruks, and Gollum also makes a cameo. He seems kind of integral to the plot. I'm not finished with it yet, and I don't want to give away too much, but he is definitely in it, and it's not Andy Serkis, but he does a very good impression of Andy Serkis. Really impressed with the voice acting. Really give it a lot more kind of legitimacy and authenticity that they could have easily skimped on. And Uruks, like I said, there's some really funny moments if you just kind of listen to their lines when they're talking amongst themselves. They don't know you're there. Very, very good lines, very fun. Another awesome thing about this game, I have not run into any notable bugs at this point, which is pretty rare for a PC game especially. I am running this on PC using a controller because I use mouse and keyboard at work all day, and it's kind of nice to kick back with the controller a little bit, but I am running it on PC. So no bugs to report, although I did have to tune down the kind of automatic settings for the graphics quite a bit. I'm running a GTX 770 right now, and for the most part I had to keep things at medium to low settings. I was able to turn a couple things up to high. For me, with an action game like this, I kind of need it to be running at 60 FPS because I find that if I'm running at 30 I play a lot worse because it's just not fluid enough to respond in the action quick enough. So I was a little disappointed that I couldn't run it at higher settings, but it still looks very good at those settings, so not too much of a disappointment there. I think if you have a lower end system than that, you'd probably have to run most things on low, but it still looks good, and I think it would scale, depending, and obviously if you're running something better than that, you'll be able to run it at 60 frames per second at higher ultra settings, no problem. Also, the keyboard and mouse support, even though I'm not using those, are great. I did try them out just to kind of get a feel for them, and they are definitely totally legitimate ways to control it, and the way that it hops back and forth is really cool. You can just, if you turn on a controller, it gives you kind of key or command prompts for the controller. If you start using your mouse and keyboard, it'll switch them automatically, and so you can use them both at the same time pretty much. It's really cool. And the biggest pro I have for this game is that it's fun. I don't want to give any spoilers away because this is just a first impressions kind of review, but like I said, there is a scene with Gollum and he sings, and it is really fun. There's enough humor to keep it from being really dark, but in the most part it's really gritty, and I think that the grit is something that's been lacking from other Lord of the Rings titles. And it is definitely intended for a mature audience. It sets that tone right at the beginning, and it's actually darker and grittier than I thought it would be, which is nice. It gives it again more kind of authenticity on its own right. Couple things that are kind of holding it back from being, in my opinion, a great game. Personally, just the content ID system. Unfortunately, Warner Brothers is really doing a number on the content ID, which, if you don't know what that is, it's basically flagging YouTube videos for monetization. If you try and do that, I wanted to do a Let's Play on this, but I cannot do that because it's being used so aggressively. So things like cutscenes, all of the music, if you have any of that in your YouTube videos, they're going to be flagged and you will not be able to monetize those. Another kind of, so that's just kind of from a YouTuber's perspective, but I really prefer it if a developer is kind of more willing to support the community around them by allowing to do videos and things like that, because it's another way to engage the game, and I think that supporting that is really important these days, aside from myself. Another kind of con that I see in the game is that it relies on action to move pretty much everything in the game. To progress the story at all, to level up, to take out war chiefs, to participate in the Nemesis system at all, it pretty much relies on defeating Uruks. And I think this is a bit of a missed opportunity, because it would have been really fun if you could have other orcs or Uruks in this game infiltrate them more, so like pit them against themselves, more of that. I'm not so far into the game, but there hasn't been too much of that. I wish there was a little bit more. But what would have been really cool, and that there isn't hardly any of in this game, is to reward exploration. Being able to go into Gondor, being able to see the elves, being able to go into different parts of the universe, I think would be so nice. And from what I can tell, there's none of that in this game. I don't know if they have any of that planned for, I don't know if they have any future games planned. It's obviously Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor, so there's definitely room for that, and I'm kind of hoping that they do. But at this point, you're kind of behind enemy lines alone in Mordor, and it gives it kind of an isolated feel. It's more like Frodo and Sam sneaking behind the Black Gate, but more badass. Rather than you're part of the Middle-earth universe. It's not so much like that, and I think that that seeing a good game like this take advantage of that feeling would be really cool, and I think everybody would like that. So while this game is good in its own right, it's a little bit confined and can be a little bit kind of lonely because you're just kind of fighting orcs on your own, and there's no real deviation from that so far. In my final review, I'm going to kind of update and see if that stays true, but so far that's definitely been the feeling. Kind of along those lines, there aren't too many awe-inspiring moments in the game or scenery. It's kind of more focused on killing, specific orcs, taking out orc bases, really focuses on the Nemesis system, and while that's really fun, there's no real deviation from that. And seeing some grand scenery is kind of a tenet of the Lord of the Rings, especially the Lord of the Rings that Peter Jackson has created. And there could be a little bit more of that. There's breathtaking scenery, but you don't really get to enjoy it that much because, again, you're behind enemy lines. You're kind of cramped in that way. And final note, there is kind of a lacking story. The story is good, the voice acting is solid, but it's a little skimpy. Most of it is action-based. Most of it is going to be taking out orc chiefs. And I kind of wish that they had a little bit more richness in the story. The opening cinematics, kind of the way it introduces you to the game, is all great. It's really well done. Some of the best, actually, I've seen. It's not cheesy, it's not clunky, it's actually really engaging and kind of heartbreaking at the beginning, but beyond that, there's not much of a story so far. Again, I'll update you as soon as I know more, but it's pretty sparse. But in summary, I really like the game. I think it did most things right, and I'm encouraged that they finally made a Lord of the Rings game worth playing. I think there are a few things that lack a true kind of Middle-earth experience that hold it back from being epic, but it is very good and it's lots of fun. I did purchase the season pass, so I do plan on covering the DLC that's coming out for this in the future, so we'll kind of keep you up to date. I'm going to do a final review, and I'm going to focus on, like I said, the Nemesis system and probably a few other videos on this, because I wanted to cover this really in depth, but I'm going to have to scale that back a little bit because I won't be able to do a Let's Play, but do still want to cover this as much as I can. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. This has been Erowan. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and I will see you in the next one.